to our hashtag Push the Future live session with our CA graduates. We're so excited to host you this afternoon as we tackle the ITC section of our 2020 ITC. So we're going to be tackling the tax section today. So the order of today will be as follows. We're going to introduce ourselves so that you can get to know us, and then we're going to go straight into the question. We will provide some exam technique and just some all-inclusive advice that we wish we had known just a few months ago. So to kick off the intros, like I said, my name is Michaela Andrews, and I'm a first-year trainee at Standard Bank, currently rotating within the Africa finance space. I did my undergraduate and postgraduate degree at the University of Johannesburg. So UJ, if you're watching, my blood is very, very orange. I remember last year this time wondering, how on earth am I going to do it? Because my route to the CA degree was quite scenic. But one thing I told myself was, there were so many people who did this before me, so who am I not to? And who are you not to? We know that next year this time, the other side is where you'll be seated too.
Hi everyone, my name is Njabulo Mahlangu. I'm currently rotating in internal reporting. I did both my undergrad and postgrad at Wits, so I'm 100% Witsy. So last year this time I was also very stressed because I did not have a training contract, and at the same time academics were all over the place. Just looking for the training contract, going from one interview to the next and being rejected caused me so much anxiety about what was going to happen this year. But it did work out for me. So trust me, even for you, it will work out.
Hi guys, my name is Naledi Machaba. I'm also a first-year trainee here at Standard Bank. I'm currently rotating in the personal and business banking central finance unit. I also studied at Wits. I did my undergrad there and my CTA there. My CTA journey was interesting to say the least. It was full of ups and downs, mostly downs, but one thing I did try to do was keep my wits about myself. If there's one thing I always said to myself was, it's okay, you'll be okay, you'll be fine, it'll work out. When you were having those bad days, when you didn't go through as much as you wanted to go through, I just say, it's okay, you'll be okay, own pace, own race. And as they both already said, many people have done it before you, and you definitely will too.
Hi everyone, my name is Adil Rajkaran, and like my colleagues here, I'm a first-year trainee in the Standard Bank CA training program. I am currently rotating through external reporting in the group reporting and analytics space. I did my undergrad with UNISA. I did my postgraduate studies with IAS, or Institute of Accounting Science. And the one thing I would definitely say about the CTA experience is that it was tough, it was overwhelming, it was a massive syllabus that was sort of compressed into a short time. But the one thing I always told myself is that what I know is what will get me through. What I don't know, well, there's nothing I can do about that. So just remember, focus on what you know, don't focus on what you don't know, and you'll be fine. So the question we are doing today is the 2020 January ITC, Paper 1, Question 2. We'll be focusing on the tax portion this week. And yeah, I think we can get right into it, guys.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. So we're going to dive into part A of this question. And the question had case law in it. So in most cases, when you see case law, because there's so much going on in text, it's that one section that you hope to get a whole lot of marks from. So I think my first question to you guys would be, how did you study case law in your city area?
So the thing that helped for me was I always said, okay, if something's not in the legislation, then it should be in the case law. So I always made sure to study my principles, because that's where I felt like I could get those triggers. So a day before the test, you know, when they say you should be resting, that was the day I spent actually just going through my principles, because I found when I tried to like parrot learn the names of the cases, that was when I was counterproductive. But when I actually learned the principles, that worked for me in a great way.
Yeah, I just had a list of all of the cases and all of their principles, and usually the night before, even the morning of the test, I'd go through it, and that's pretty much how I'd study my case law.
Yeah, definitely. I think just to add to what you guys were saying, I think like there's very few people out there who can actually memorize all of the cases and learn it that way. Like each case, I know that it seems like a lot because each case has this massive story there, but the only way that you'll actually sort of understand and it will stick in your mind is if you picture that story in your head, sort of like how you would picture a movie or a book or something like that.
and you can relate it to the question better when you know.
Yeah.
And even
where it
what
came
Adil was saying, like, don't memorize your case
Yeah.
law, because when you understand something, it's very hard to forget it because you've understood it, so it sticks longer.
And there's so many of them, especially in CTA. Like, you can't memorize that.
Okay. So when we look at part A, it says that we should discuss with reference to the relevant case law whether an amount of 175,000 can be claimed as a deduction. So a little background story into what was happening. We had one of our employees in this company who was injured while at work, being injured by a forklift, and then she claimed some of the medical fees from the company. So now the company would like to know, can they be able to get a deduction on this amount? So the first part of the question talks about discuss. So discuss is one of those parts that was a struggle for most of us in CTA, because you look at the question and you're like, it's easy until the marks come back and it is something else. So I think the first thing that I'd like to bring to the table is, how do we make sure we get those marks that are required in the question? What advice would you guys give?
I'd say number one, Section 102 of the Tax Admin Act, because you know that 1 mark is given.
Always. Yeah. Also, how we were taught to answer theory questions in undergrad, you know, the whole issue, like state the issue, then state the principle, then apply the principle, and then conclude. So following that, just having that in your head, I think when you're approaching a theory question helps out a bit. And then also remember that the application portion must be the most chunkier one.
Yeah.
So I remember my tutor would always tell us that even if you don't know what to say, state the principle, but with the name of the company that's in the scenario, and that's you applying it and you get the mark. Because if you're just gonna copy the ledge or copy down the principle or whatever of the case, you don't really get the mark. So apply it, put the name that you see of the company in, and you get the mark.
Yeah, it's always that obvious point, and sometimes it's just restating the question, and you think, nah, you don't write that down. I never used to write that down because I used to think, no, there's no way you're going to get this mark, especially in a CTA year. Like maybe undergrad that would fly, but not now. But it would be there in every single solution.
Yeah.
So now, most cases when I saw the word discuss, my first struggle would be, how long should my discussion be? So what I've learned is that our discussion is guided by the number of marks that we've been allocated. So if you look at this part A, they're saying it's 10 marks. So that's quite a lot of marks, which means that in your dish, you want to go into as much detail as possible, and you also want to get those small points. So the first part they talk about is that they say relevant case law. So this is usually the case. If you need to go to case law, they'll give you that clue that talk about case law. I think my advice for case law is that always introduce your case law. So talk about that this is the issue. As Naledi has already mentioned, that you need to have an introduction. So even when you are in your discussion of this, of the solution, say that this is the issue, then you write your principle, then apply. And applying can also be as simple as just adding the company name to the principle that you had.
Just to add there, and I think when you identify the issue, it almost makes it easier in your head to answer the question, because you're like, okay, this is what's wrong, this is what we need to address.
And also, because now you know the issue, as Naledi said, it helps you to be able to conclude. It is very, very important to conclude. Because now, remember, when you look at this question, there was 1 mark for communication and logical acumen. And the only way that you get that mark is if you conclude. So now, even if your conclusion is to the wrong side, for the fact that your acumen supported your conclusion, you will get that 1 mark. And remember, in CTA, every mark counts, everything.
I think to just add to that, like, that was also the logic I had when doing a paper. So I used to count the communication marks as soon as we got the required. And in some papers, it was as much as 10. So my first thought was, I need to score 40 out of the remaining 90 here, because those 10 have to be in the bag.
Okay, I think we can move to part B.
Okay, so I'll be touching on part B and part C. So part B was calculating normal tax payable, and there was a few different elements in it. So I'll be looking at the foreign currency translation. So when you read the required, right, it states that under part 2 rather, it says that the detailed income statements of the South African and the Moroccan branches of the retail division. So as soon as you see Moroccan branch then you know that there's probably going to be some sort of foreign currency, right? So if there's foreign currency, there's obviously going to be a foreign currency translation. So that would be a trigger for me that, okay, I'm going to need to translate something. And whenever you're looking at foreign currency translations, there's a lot of different provisions in the Act and in the legislation that have specific transactions that you would use to translate and specific provisions to translate foreign currency. But there's section 25 cap D, and that's your more general provision, right? And I say it's general because if there isn't a specific provision that relates to whatever transaction you're looking at, then you'd usually just default back to section 25 cap D. So for me, how I liked to study tax was to look for look for triggers in the question, right? So here my trigger would have been the Moroccan branch. And also if you read further down in that paragraph, and I'm under part 2 of question 2, there's a MAD and it gives you the currency, the amount in the currency, the Moroccan currency. You can see that that's not rand, so you're going to have to translate. So there you can put stars there and write section 25 cap D, or there may be a specific provision that you can relate to, right?
And I think just with section 25D, you must always be careful. You need to see, are you dealing with a person or a natural person? Because then you're translating at the incorrect rate. So that's always something that I always make sure to look out for.
And here we were dealing with a permanent establishment of a South African company. So 25 cap D says that you translate that using the average rates, right? So just to quickly touch on another specific provision that we do in CTA that's not our favorite, is section 24 cap I, right? So 24 cap I looks specifically at gains and losses on foreign exchange transactions that involve an exchange item. So for something like section 24 cap I, the triggers that I'd look for is an exchange item. Okay, well, first of all, you'd see that, okay, there's foreign currency, so I'm going to translate. You see an exchange item, you're like, okay, bells should ring, 24 cap I. And then the nice thing about 24 cap I is if you flag it and if you've placed it correctly, you're able to follow 24 cap I, section 24 cap I nice and methodically, because if section 24 cap I1, the exchange item definition applies, you go on to section 24 cap I2, you define person, and then that means section 24 cap I3 applies. So that's also another way I liked to study, was to have steps so that when you see these triggers, you know that, okay, I need to do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 with that specific transaction, right?
So, sorry, just to come in there, like one of the things that also confused me about like foreign translations and stuff was that you don't know which way to look because there's so much to it. There isn't just like, as you said, there could be a specific provision and there's a lot of those. So one thing I did like at year end to maybe reconcile everything was to say, go through my entire syllabus, pick out all of these sections, put it together, learn them together. So they could have been 25D, 24I, I know paragraph 43 from the 8th schedule. And yeah, there were so many more that I can't even think of now.
Yeah, so I think with practicing, you're able to find those specific sections and then you look for the trigger. So when you see the trigger, you're like, okay, it's that section. And then you know that if you can't find it then 25 cap D, maybe it's...
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, it's very important to consolidate at the end of your work at the end of the year. Because in most cases, we taught in pieces. So one part of that section will come with the VET Act that will only be done at the end of the year. So there's times when we head into the final exam time, you want to do those questions that will integrate everything so that you can now consolidate your work and see how all the sections come together.
And I think you should look for a question or questions that relate to like the specific provision that you want to see so that you can see how it comes up. Because sometimes you read the theory and you know what it is, but you don't know how it's actually going to come up. So it helps to just go through a question that shows you how to do it. So the other part of Part B and Part C was there was a donation. There was 2 donations actually. So with donations, I like to split it into 2 parts. So there's either a donation to a PBO and then a donation that's not to a PBO. So in our question, under the donations, there was the first donation that was to the Johannesburg Children's Home, and they told us that it is a public benefit organization. So the PBO donations go into the taxable income, you put it in, you put the deduction, if it meets all the requirements of Section 18 Cap A, obviously. And then once you've put it into your taxable income, you're done. So the nice thing about PBOs is that they don't have donation tax, so once you put it into taxable income, you're done. And then you have donations that are not to a PBO. So with these ones, it's a bit tricky because they may touch normal tax and they also touch donations tax. And you just have to remember that there is a normal tax element of it. So if they were to ask all tax implications, you'd give your donations tax implications, which is calculated separately, and then your normal tax implications. And it's easy to forget because sometimes it's like CGT that comes up if you were if you donated an asset, because a donation is a disposal. So you must just remember that if you are donating like maybe capital, there's going to be a CGT portion. In our example, in our paper, it was inventory. So there's going to be an inventory add back in taxable income. So you must just remember that. And also with this question, they asked for normal tax payable. So this inventory donation was in the taxable income, but it was also going to be in donations tax because it has a donations tax leg, a donations tax leg, right? So with donations tax, just remember that all donations pretty much have donations tax unless it's to a PBO, and then just always check the exemptions. So section 56 addresses the exemptions. You don't want to go into a whole donations tax calculation and then it's exempt. Now you have to, now you don't know what you're doing. So just check that, look at the donations separately, calculate donation tax separately, but one of the first things you must do for each donation is just make sure that it's not exempt, because you don't want to go on a tangent and it's exempt.
Definitely.
Because you're not going to hit the box.
So I guess with donations, it's important to always ask yourself, how did this asset or this item come into the company? Because that will not trigger my normal tax.
Yes.
So just remember normal tax of donations.
I know I forgot that all the time.
I remember my tutor also used to tell us that with every required, especially if you see all tax implications, the nice thing about this required is that it just said tax and donations tax. If it says all tax implications, write down all the tax that could apply. Normal tax, donation tax, dividend tax, all of the taxes that could apply, so that you don't miss out on anything. And as soon as you address one, you take it off, take it off. And then if you forget one, you can be, oh yes, and then you go into it.
And unfortunately, donations tax is one of those that we forget. So
Yeah.
donations tax, dividends tax, and securities transfer tax, I think.
Yes.
So those three are the ones that we really forget. So you want to be very careful of those.
And you know, you're saying that we forget donations tax, but I feel like donations tax is that leg of lamb that you get in a paper, because you know, this is where I can score all that meat that I need to pass this paper, you know. And when we get to like section C, which is a pure donations tax question, what I like to do when I see like a tax transaction is I draw some pictures. So if they allocate 1.5 minutes per mark, I take 1.3 minutes to actually answer, and the 0.2 seconds I actually spend to draw a picture, because that helps me to actually identify the transaction. Because what I feel like sometimes is I'm explaining this way, but the transaction is saying something else. So that always helped me. So if you look like in this example, we talk about Sogren under that heading, and then it's about Forever and Mr. Sandile. But then the fact that he's actually a connected person is in the beginning of the information. So if you take some time to really draw your picture, say, okay, Forever's here, but what actually happens? We see that Sandile actually, technically, he's a beneficiary of the trust, so he's a connected person to Sogren, right? So it's all of those things that you need to identify. So even in a paper, highlight your taxpayers in different colors so that that can come through.
Can I just add quickly? Michaela draws pictures. Like for me, pictures never really helped. Right? So I think if you're not into pictures, try maybe using your highlighters sparingly, so that you know that the only things you're highlighting is the stuff that you know you're going to forget. So that's what I would do. And then I just write notes on the side. I was never a picture person at all.
I think it's really good to know yourself in this race, because I find, because I'm a visual learner, so I need to see things happening on my paper, you know.
And sorry.
Sorry, as much as they make notes, I make notes as well, but mine needs to be in different colors, so really get to know yourself.
Yeah, just to take it back a bit, you guys were talking about how donations tax is like a little bit more simple, and I feel like not only the case with donations tax, but sometimes when I get a paper, I would like to do donations tax, estate duty, dividends tax, because the thing is, I think the most confusing part is not knowing how to isolate something. Your mind is all over the place, but for these sections, your mind is not all over the place because it's so limited. It's like a little box, and you can just stay within it.
You know, definitely. And I think, you know, when we get to donations tax, something that I always would put, like, because you're in CTA now, you're not in undergrad anymore, so I'll always put like a trigger and say possible section 7C, because I feel like that's where some of the meatier stuff comes through, because now there is donations tax, but they want you to identify who will be liable for this donations tax. So for instance, in this company, because Mr. Sandile owned 100% of Forev, this donation was actually made at his instance. So if you just go and you answer and you say, Mr. Sandile will be liable, that's 1 mark. So just some easy marks in this question. If we even look just for identifying that interest-free loan amount times the 7%, well, yeah, it's 7.75%, that gave you a mark. The next thing was the exemption of 100,000 Rand that every individual is able to get. Then what the actual donations tax will be, so times 20%, when it's deemed to be made and when it's going to be deemed to be paid over. That's already 80% of a question. So I feel like that's why I said like this is the leg of lamb when you get into an ITC question.
Donations tax is nice because you just open up to section 56 and everything is just under there. And also when calculating donations tax, I think just make sure you calculate it per donation. Especially because of the general exemption. So your first donation, for example, would get the most, right? Or would have first dibs to that exemption. And then obviously if you have a lot and then the exemption finishes, they don't get the exemption at the end. So just calculate it separately, your donations separately, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the second time you brought that point out about stating the obvious. And that's also something I realized in like the VAT portion. So where there was this entity, I think, Sogren, and they purchased a block of flats and then they couldn't sell it, so they decided to rent it out. They were earning rental income, paying insurance premiums on that. And I think, like when I looked at the answer, the first thing they state for 2 marks, the first mark is saying that they would have and this is on the VAT portion of it now. The first thing that they would have stated is that they would have originally claimed input tax to the extent of 100% because it was used 100% for making taxable supplies. And I'm thinking, I probably would not have written that at all because I would have focused on what the actual problem in that question was. No, I would have went straight there. And when it comes to the actual problem as well, there's issues there because it's not very easy to identify section 18(1), that trigger. It doesn't come very easily. And even when that trigger does come to you and you do go and apply all the rules, you put in the formula, then the other parts of the question, you forget about it entirely because they were asking you for VAT implications on this entity, all VAT implications, but I did not underline the word all. So when they said all, they aren't just talking about the change in use, they're also talking about the rental income, the insurance premiums, and those 2 points at the end are another 2 free marks. So I missed out the first 2, I missed out the last 2. I've missed out 4 out of 8 marks that I believe you should even score at an undergrad level.
I think you just need to make sure that, because we get our required just before reading time ends, you need to actually take time and analyze your required like you did the question, because then stuff like that you miss out on. And if you didn't read that all, then that's a lot of marks. So who even knows if I read it?
Because I think with me, if a question that like they guided me to say it's transaction 1 and 2, talk about the implications, I'd do much better compared to when they said all implications. So I think the first thing was when you talk about analyzing the required, because I also tend to miss certain words in my required. So I could miss that all and be like, that's implications. There was a point where when I read my required, I would take over every word in that required just to make sure that I've read each and every word in that required. And also when the question says all VAT implications, I'd go back to the scenario quickly and record all my transactions. So as I'm discussing, I'm scratching out to say this transaction I've dealt with and this transaction I've dealt with. So that way you're making sure that you've discussed everything in the question.
I think definitely when you see all VAT implications, I know for me, I always miss the change in use. And it was so irritating because then your solution comes back and you're like, I could have gotten this. So it's always like if I see in my required all VAT implications, because I know for myself, it's something that I don't always, pick up on. I write in my required possible change in use, because here was a change in use. You just see that it's been moved from 100% taxable to exempt, and then you can miss that change in use so easily.
And I think, especially for VAT, because VAT is all over the place. Flagging VAT is just a mission on its own. And we actually have a question that's asking, how do you flag your legislation sufficiently to prepare for an exam? And I think that is one of those tricky ones. Like you just have to have a strategy. Okay, well, my strategy for that was to try maybe like highlight a specific thing in a specific color or like have the same flags or something. I don't know how you guys did it, but that.
I think when it comes to flagging, the first most important thing is to understand what kind of a person you are. I think we're going to share legislations with Michaela. What I've learned in City A that there's two types of people. There's me. I do not know my section by head. So this is what my ledge looks like. I literally flag everything. Then you have Michaela. She knows her section, so she doesn't need as many flags. And I think for vets, yes, my flags are all pink, so my vet is pink. And then when it comes to change in use specifically, because change in use, you'll find that they tell you what kind of a change in use it is in one part, and then in the next part they tell you what the implications are. I would put my flags in such a way that they are almost on top of each other but at different lengths, so that I know if I'm supposed to be in section 10, under section 10 there's a bigger flag that says go to section 11. That way I'm able to find all my implications much quicker.
And also practice it so that you know where to go.
Yes.
You know where.
And I feel like with me, orange was the color that meant I'm not comfortable with this section. So whenever I saw something in a required that I knew, ooh, I don't really know this so well, I go to my orange flags, and it was so easy to identify. So it really depends on person per person. But for me, it was like, okay, I'm more comfortable with, for instance, income tax, or like the most general thing. So then that would be flagged in yellow. But stuff that was really like, I might not even pass this question. Let's put an orange flag in there for me. Yeah,
like I think I was entirely opposite. I must have had like 25 flags on my book entirely. But the thing is, like, it really...
I'm like,
No, but like it really confused me, and I think at the start I had more flags, and I just felt like that was the norm. And then like later in the year, I was like, you know, I'm just going to do my own thing, what's comfortable for me, because I feel like that's also something that you'll feel that pressure, you know, earlier in the year to sort of study things your own way. And I know you were saying something about time management and how you had a rule about like using a multiple of 1.3. So you have a 10-mark question and you use 1.3 because it's slightly less than 1.5, and it just gives you a little bit of breathing space in the question. And like when I think about that, the rule was that, hey, you should never break this rule, you should stick to it. And I know you said you would stick to it.
No, me, as soon as the time was done, you move next question. Next question. I'll come back if I need to.
And I would always like break the rule, because I would be like, okay, there's a 10-mark question here, and I'm not answering that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a lot to score like 2 marks in the end. So I'm going to like scrap that, and I'm going to take that time and I'm going to put it everywhere else, because I don't want to have to change my train of thought every time I jump between requireds. And that was not like advisable, but that's what I would do, because that's what was comfortable for me. So I guess the rule is that there is no rules. Well, so okay, sometimes there is. There are rules sometimes. So but sometimes it's okay to like bend it, I guess, or do what's more comfortable for you.
It's relative, because sometimes maybe you really know that section really well, and you know that you probably will score the marks. I just didn't want to get carried away. That's why I just next question.
And I think because we've been like doing this for 4 years, you sort of have an idea, like you know yourself. And I think for me, City A is about know you, because that way you'll know how to go about it. Because for me, time-wise, if a question is like, for example, our part A, it was 10 marks for the discussion and 1 mark for communication. I would only say 10 times the 1.5, so I'd spend 15 minutes. So there's 1 marks for communication. I'm giving myself leeway so that in case I need to spend more time somewhere else, I'll do it. And I think the other thing is, just because you have 15 minutes to finish a question doesn't mean you need to finish it in 15 minutes. If you are done in 12 minutes, then move on. You have now 3 extra minutes to spend on another question. So do not get into that comfort zone of 15 minutes, you know.
If you know it, write it and
finish.
I think that also speaks to the point of letting time guide you a bit too much, because like, for example, looking at the very last thing, which was section 23H, the prepaid expense, like sometimes it could be a long question with a lot of marks, and you would think, hey, it's long, but if you don't know the rules or if you apply them in the wrong order, then what if you wrote a lot because you thought that was the right thing to do?
Yeah.
Like, okay, maybe in this question, in this particular case, if you let it guide you, it might be the right thing. But you know, it's not always the right thing, because sometimes you see the mark, but you forgot about something entirely different that would come into that question. And now you're writing a lot because you think it might be the right thing to do, but not quite.
I think then my other question, because we're on the time management thing, like, are you guys one of those people who go to the bathroom during an exam, or like, are you just there 3 hours you are writing? How does it work?
Guys, like, I think I had to do that, especially sometimes you get a question because of the exam pressure, the nerves. I start forgetting things that I know, and then I'm like, I just go to the bathroom, splash my face, come back and carry on, because there are things that you do know. It's the pressure that is blocking you from not answering the way you're supposed to. And this thing is a mental game more than anything. So if you just go back and get yourself back on track and come back and write again, I feel like it wasn't 3 minutes wasted. For someone else it might feel that way, but for me it wasn't, because it changed the game for the rest of the paper.
Yeah, it helps refresh you.
Yeah.
I never stood up once in the whole of undergrad, and I stood up for the first time in like test 2 of CTA, and then after that, every single other paper I stood up. Every session actually, so it would be like twice a day, I'd always stand up, just, you know, to regain the balance. Because it's hot in there.
I think for me, so I don't take the breaks, and the reason behind that is, if I feel like I'm behind time, I panic a lot. But so for every exam, I'd carry my favorite sweets and I'd carry a banana. So when it gets very hot, I'm just like 2 jelly tots, and then we are back at it. So I think it goes back to, before you go to that final exam, find out how do you manage stress, what calms you down. Take that with you. If it's taking that break, take it, and please do not feel guilty. Because I think that is the other thing about CTA. We feel guilty literally about everything.
I remember when we were first told about the thing of taking breaks, when like having a snack quickly and taking a breather between questions. I was like, never. But it helps, because like as you said, the pressure gets you and you know the stuff. But it just needs to come back.
You need to find it in that compartment somewhere.
Exactly.
You know, also, sorry, you know, when you're looking at the paper and like your neck is down, and then you just get like stuck in that position. So sometimes what I would do is I wouldn't even like eat or drink anything, but I just like pick my head up, look at the ceiling, look around me, like, you know, not looking to anyone else's paper, but like,
regain balance.
I even forgot about that next string. Suddenly I'm triggered.
So I think going back to the guilt thing, I remember, I think there's also, you know how our lecturers be like, get your sleep, take a break, do go out and do other things as well. I remember most of my friends would feel so bad. There's like my one friend who'd even go out and not post about it, because he'd feel like, you know, we'd all be judging him that you're not studying enough. So I think also, how did you guys like take that break and not feel bad about it? How do you go about that?
So I booked like Sundays out of my schedule. So I took the entire Sunday off because I went to church. So already I had half a day only left for the rest of the day. And I said, I'm just going to take this day off, because for me, I was consoling myself with the fact that at least I'm preventing burnout at a later stage, because I take that break once a week. So that was how I managed my breaks.
I think with me, as I said in the beginning, like if there's one thing I told myself was, it's fine, you'll be okay, it's okay. Don't look anywhere else. Yours is to just look where you're going, because you'll see someone sitting in a library for 3 hours, 3-4 hours longer than you, and you think that you're not doing enough. But you probably have done more than they have, so it's okay, you'll be fine. As long as you're on track with what you're doing, you'll be fine.
And I think that to wrap it all up, I think I'm noticing one key theme here, and that's flexibility. All 4 of us are different. We all have different styles. We all do different quirky things. But ultimately it's about what you do with your time, and that's why I say it's about what you know, because that's what will pass you. You can know 60% of everything and you can still pass, or you can know 80% and focus on what you don't know. But that panic will bring you down, you know. So are we
Yeah, I think
yeah.
that's all we have time for today.
Yeah.
I hope it was a fruitful session for everyone that tuned in. Be sure to join us next week as we tackle some more of the ITC 2020.
Thank you. Bye.